Hey there, everyone. I am going to talk today about a really cool tool inside of Maya called the Camera Sequencer that allows you to kind of do your editing in Maya without having to export a whole bunch of playblasts to Premiere to assemble together. And this is really good because it also helps to make it so it's easier to transition actions from shot to shot because you can actually see how those shots connect together. It's not done so much in post. So let's just talk about this real quick. Most of the time, my recommendation is to not actually put all of your cameras in the same scene. And there are various reasons why I don't do that. Most of the time with animation, I don't do it just because it helps to be able to have separate scenes for different reasons. Sometimes they take completely different shot setups. They take completely different camera setups, even lighting setups. But in a scene like this, where it's pretty much all the same, and I'll give you kind of an idea. This is just a motion capture sequence, right, where I have my character moving back and forth. Um, I am I'm keeping things pretty much very very similar. The lighting setup is similar. Um, the shot framing obviously is going to change from shot to shot, but most things are staying the same. So this is actually not a bad place to use it. And what I'm going to show you is if I pop out into just my straight perspective view here, and I kind of just zoom over the top here, let's just turn off the ceiling so we don't get lost there. I have my character moving back and forth between the kitchen and this counter, and ultimately sometimes the character's position changes a great deal, pops over. A lot of times this was to do with the fact that the character actually rotated and he would have ended up going over to the stove instead of over to the fridge based on the way the motion capture was created. So some of the shots are designed to hide that fact. And so there's a little bit of creative cinematography going on here as well. And so the cinematography can be very useful to being able to create some kind of decent continuity and hide some of those not errors, but hide some of those facts that there was a mismatch between the recording of the motion capture and the actual set that you are given as a 3D set. So I have a lot of different shots in here, as you probably noticed. I have about 19 different shots. For some reason, shot 09 ended up here. I don't know why that's the case. And a few shots that are missing. They're not actually missing. It's just that their numbering got sort of switched around somehow, and I wasn't able to create shot 5, for instance, because it was being used by something else, the name. So, but if we take a look at shot 1, we can see how shot 1 over a period of time would then transition into shot 2, right? Which over time would then start to transition into shot 3. Basically, as soon as my character jumps right here, we might be going into shot 3, right? And as I mentioned, we want to be able to do this in a way that there is that we don't have to worry about play blasting things out and editing them together. So here's the tool. The tool we want to find is the camera sequencer. So Windows, Animation Editors, Camera Sequencer. And this is basically very similar to the kind of editing sequence sequence editing tools that you would have in Premiere. They're not quite as advanced, but that's okay. What we'd want to do is basically figure out when do we want the first sequence to start and when do we want it to end, for instance. So if we go to shot 1 here, I know that my sequence starts at frame 1100 in this case, and I had written down some notes before about when I wanted things to cut. I don't remember if I remember them exactly off the top of my head, but let's just say I usually cut on actions, so it might be somewhere as I'm reaching for this bowl. And it'll be easier if I kind of trim down my timeline here. So let's just trim it down to about 2,000 frames. So let's just say that I start to cut on the action of reaching for the bowl right around the 1240 mark. So between 1100 and 1240, that's going to be shot 1. So in the camera sequencer here, let's go ahead, create a shot. So we'll go into shot and then definitely go into the options. and we'll call this shot 1. Now, because I've created a bunch of shots before, it may not let me actually call it shot 1. I'm not entirely sure, because shot 1 might be taken. But it's going to say, what is the name that you want to call this thing? I don't have to call it shot 1. I could give it a name that's very descriptive, for instance, instead of shot 1. But it also wants to know which camera, and the camera I'm using is called shot 1 as well. So let's just say shot 1 there. There we go. Start time, well, that was 1100. And our end time, that's 1240. Okay, well, we don't have anything in the sequence yet, so the new shot placement can go pretty much any of these. Current frame is fine. It's going to stick it to wherever the current frame is. So let's stick that current frame back to 1100, and let's hit apply. Cool, and it created it. That's good. So what we have right now, and I can use inside the camera sequencer, I can use my standard Maya controls like Alt right mouse drag, and that will actually sort of zoom in onto my timeline. Alt middle mouse will help me to pan. Alt left mouse doesn't really do anything so much, but this is kind of like working in the graph editor. So we can see here from frame 1100 to frame 1240, we now have shot 01. All right, so let's create shot 02. And let's just presume that shot 02 starts right at frame 1241. Let's go and take a look at that. Shot 2, it's always important to see it. And really, we should look at this with the resolution gate on. Ultimately, hopefully, as you were setting up your shots, you did place them within the proper resolution gate. And now he starts to turn, and certainly probably just as he's about to turn there, maybe around frame 1600, that's when we would conclude that shot. So we'll say 1241 to 1600. So create shot and shot 02 using camera called shot 02. And it seems to have disappeared somehow. There we go. Starting from frame 1241 to frame 1600. Now you want this new shot placement to go after the current shot. All right, so place that there, and notice how it's now popped in there after the current shot. So if I drag my timeline back and forth now, I can just drag it here inside the camera sequencer, or I can drag it down here. But dragging in the camera sequencer is actually going to give me the result of these two shots being placed side by side. If I drag this now between there, you'll see that we get that jump transition right there. And I'll turn off the resolution gate so we don't end up seeing that. I usually like to have each of my shots sort of one on a different video channel. So that way I can more easily see back and forth where they begin and where they end. Now the next shot, let's just do something slightly different. So let's go into shot 3 here. And the previous shot ended at frame 1600. The question is, do we need it to really start at frame 1601? Probably not. This is the beauty of editing, is we can probably cut down some of this motion here. So we might just start this from frame 1665 or so and carry that through until, well, there's probably some kind of reaching that's going on here. 1665 to, let's just say 1765, something like that. So shot 3, using camera called shot 3, and 1665 to 1765 after current shot. Apply. And now Alt middle mouse click drag. There we go. There, that's popped in. So we start to see this here. Let's move this down. All right, that's great. Now, if you decided that you wanted to change where one of these shots began or ended, you can do that. So if you don't want it to start at 1665, for instance, maybe you wanted to start it a little bit later, you're not going to necessarily click and drag on the edges like you would in Premiere, but you can go in and click on the frame number that you want to change. So if I maybe wanted this to start at frame 1675, 10 frames later, it will allow you to do that, and it's going to reduce that in the direction that you would, so basically if you're trimming it from the left-hand side, it's going to pull this back. from the left side. So I just need to pull this down to make sure that it overlaps, or it just almost overlaps. If it does overlap, it's going to display, of course, whatever's on top, just as you would expect in any video editor. I can zoom in a lot more if I want to, just make sure that I get good placement. It's a good timeline placement. I could do the same thing to the end. I could trim where it ends. This also is telling me here how many frames within this actual sequence am I at. So right now, we only started at frame 1100, and we're ending on frame 1765, but we did cut out a few frames between 1600 and 1675, 75 frames to be exact. So our length here is only truly 767 frames long in total. So it gives us some information there. Now, what I've done is I'd gone through and I'd created an entire movie with all of these shots being cut from one to the next and to the next and to the next. And that works really well. When you want to go ahead and render this out, though, you don't necessarily want to render it out through the camera sequencer. So you need to be able to create a camera that adheres to all of these shots. Basically, you need to create a camera that kind of moves from shot to shot's location and also will obey any kind of camera movement that was created in any one of these shots as well. And that's called an Ubercam. So you might have seen that here when we were looking at this before, create Ubercam. All right, so if we do that, let's just go ahead and grab all of our shots. Just drag a selection around all of them. There we go. Create Ubercam. And let's just see what's popped into our outliner here. Okay, so I have two Ubercams. I'm not sure if that first one did quite what I wanted it to do. So let's just take a look through it. Perspective, Ubercam, the first one. All right, so this is only that one. Actually, hold on, let's go set this back to 1100. Let's make sure I'm telling the truth. Yeah, I'm only seeing it from that one position that was selected when I created it. So let's go and delete that camera and let's look through Ubercam 1. That was the second one that I created. Okay, so that's actually not giving me the correct position there. So let's just go back and recreate this. So delete that. Okay, so if I just go ahead and let's just create it again, I'll show you what's actually happening here. Create Ubercam, and I'll go through and it will actually create it for all of my shots, but if I look through it, panels, perspective, Ubercam, it doesn't appear to be following the correct camera angles. As you can see here, I'm dragging through those frames. But what it's done, if I go back all the way to frame 1, is it has worked it out for the correct camera angles, but starting from frame 1. Not a big deal. We can always go in and make sure that our camera is selected, and we'll go into our graph editor. And we can just move all of this down so that it actually starts not from frame 1, but from the frame that we actually need it to start from. So just making sure that we see where these transitions occur from. It's kind of interesting where it's starting from here. So this should be camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. Just make sure that it starts from 1100. Frame 1100. And hopefully that will line up. So frame 1100. And let's see what happens now. So let's go down to frame 1100. Yep, that's matching up now. So that was just a bit of a timing change. It really depends. I mean, because my animation starts 1100 frames into it, the Ubercam obviously doesn't quite line up with that, but it's a very easy fix. We can very easily move that stuff around. And so that's pretty much the way that I would go about this. The Ubercam now is the one camera that you could render from, and it would give you all your shots from the correct angles, and there you go. So best of luck with this. I hope the camera sequencer ends up being a tool that you enjoy using. Best of luck.